All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. I've been sitting on this one for a little bit, and please forgive me in the delay. I say this because I've been meaning to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles for several days now, and I just haven't gotten to it, but here I am right now getting ready to talk about it with the Super Bowl right around the corner, of course, between San Francisco and Kansas City. But nonetheless, there's some things that I definitely want to touch on about these Philadelphia Eagles. Now, we saw their promising season end on such a sour note. And when that happened, you knew the changes were coming to this team. Now, Nick Sirianni, of course, will continue to be the head coach of the Eagles. He's 34 and 17 in his 3 years at the helm as the head coach of the Eagles, with three trips to the postseason and one NFC championship on his resume. And for the third consecutive year, the Eagles will have themselves a new offensive coordinator as well as a new defensive coordinator. As just after 1 year as the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, Brian Johnson was let go, and the same could be said for defensive coordinator Sean Desai, who was demoted midseason in favor of Matt Patricia. Now, there are a lot of questions that are going to be answered for the Philadelphia Eagles with the offseason right around the corner. Now, is this the end for longtime Eagles such as Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, and Brandon Graham? All are free agents. All have been big time catalyst to the success that the Philadelphia Eagles have had over the last decade or so, which included winning one Super Bowl championship. And basically, it looked like Jason Kelsey right after the loss of the Bucks. It looked like he was done. Uh, we don't know. We don't know what's next for Fletcher Cox, who's one of the longest tenured Eagles, going back to when Andy Reid was still the head coach in Philadelphia. So we got to wait and see for that. And that's big because all three of those guys, they've been there, done that. But more importantly, they're leaders in the locker room. And of course, nothing lasts forever. I totally understand that. But you think about the disappointment for the Eagles this season after, that strong start. They lost five out of the last six heading into the postseason. And some of it, you know, to call it lethargic would be, stating it mildly as far as how the Eagles finished down the stretch, especially in their card round loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, you heard about it and you could see the turmoil on this team as it spilled onto the field on Sunday afternoons. But the big question for me is, will the Philadelphia Eagles be able to get back on track? And when I say get back on track, get back to what they had in 2022 when they were within an eyelash of winning the Super Bowl. Now, we've seen some of the changes that have been made to the Eagles so far. You bring in Vic Fangio on defense after he was just let go by the Miami Dolphins. And Vic Fangio, of course, is a veteran defensive coordinator who's been around for quite some time now, of course. But Vic Fangio is all about pressure. He's all about bringing it from, your front seven. And I think that is something that the Eagles have to get back to because when you think about 2022 for Philadelphia, when they got to the Super Bowl, this was a team that created pressure all season long. They had 70 sacks. They had four guys, I think maybe five, that had double digit sacks. And that was big for this team because we saw them go from 70 sacks in 2022 to just 43 in 2023. And in doing so, this pass defense was not as good. We saw opponents of the Eagles convert nearly 50% of their third downs on this Philadelphia defense, which was last in the National Football League. And of course, when that happens, you're also going to lose the time of possession battle as well. Philly, they played fast in 2022. That was not the case. They did it on offense with their run game as their run game set up their pass. And I know that they have two dynamic wide receivers in Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, but nonetheless, their strength to me was their run game. They've got to get back to that. So what do? You bring in Kellen Moore, who was just let go by the Chargers after 1 year, and of course, previously he had been the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. But make no mistake about it, Philly's got to get back to their run, and that's something that I think that this front office will address in the offseason because you take some of that pressure off of quarterback Jalen Hurts. And then when you do pass the football, it's more effective. But getting back to this defense, they got to go out there and create pressure. And just like I said, this offense has to play fast. This defense needs to get back to playing fast, physical, and with an attitude as well. You think back to the Eagles in 2022. They played like bullies, and I mean on both sides of the football. That offensive line got after you. That run game got after you. You think about what this defensive line was able to do with their pressure. And the thing was, the bullies got bullied in Super Bowl number 53, courtesy of the Kansas City Chiefs last February. And I say this because that Eagles defense, which had 70 sacks, which was an NFL single season record, they didn't sniff Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl last year. And this was a Patrick Mahomes that was out there basically playing on one leg. They really didn't create a lot of pressure on him, especially in the second half. And that was the difference to me in that contest. And of course, it carried over to this past season. Yes, there was a hangover for this Philadelphia Eagles squad, and they never got recovered from it. It also didn't hurt or didn't help, rather, that they lost both of their coordinators from that team. Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen went on to be head coaches. Shane Steichen with the Indianapolis Colts, and of course, Jonathan Gannon with the Arizona Cardinals. But nonetheless, the Eagles need to find a way to get back to their identity, and that's going to be important. It's also going to be important to get consistency for quarterback Jalen Hurts. Why? Because we're talking about a guy who is now going to be under his third different offensive coordinator in as many years. And just like the head coach is so important to a football team, that relationship between offensive coordinator, play caller, and quarterback is essential. And I think, Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts, they definitely have to be on the same page. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So you look at Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Eagles, and of course, Howie Roseman, who runs this front office in Philadelphia. Clearly, they still believe in Nick Sirianni as their head coach because if they didn't, they wouldn't have brought him back because even in success, it has not prevented Jeffrey Lurie from making changes in the past. They still believe in Nick Sirianni, but how much longer? That's going to be the thing. I look at it like this: the Philadelphia Eagles, even if they were to lose the likes of Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham to retirement, possibly, okay, this team is still talented. Why? Because Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman have done a good job as far as drafting and developing their talent. And I think that is something that has allowed the Philadelphia Eagles to remain as contenders. And that's going to be very, very important going forward. But it just comes down to the team chemistry. The Eagles had plenty of it in 2022, not so much in 2023. So that's going to be the big factor right there. Philly sitting back, and I'm sure some of them are saying, "Hey, listen, we were in this spot last year, as far as making our final preparations to take the field for the Super Bowl, and they were as close can be to winning that championship. And unfortunately, for their sake, it didn't work out for them. So clearly, the offseason began for the Eagles last month, prematurely following their loss in the wild card round against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I want to see what they're going to do if they can get back to the basics, get back to the things that made them successful in 2022. It was that run game, and it was their ability to create pressure, from their defensive line. Basically, it came down to both of their lines, the offensive line and the defensive line. They played with that swagger, they played with that attitude. And I think, just having that taken away from them, if you will, in the Super Bowl last year. They just never recovered from that. It was a long season for the Eagles. They just were unable to get out of their way. Hopefully, for their sakes, they can have a reset right now and recharge. And let's see what this team will continue to do in the offseason to come back to be bigger, better, and badder for 2024. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Now, I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Also, tomorrow night, please feel free to check me out on this same channel as I will be breaking down Super Bowl number 54, which is set to take place this Sunday in Vegas between the Niners and, of course, the defending champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. And, of course, if you're already subscribed to this channel and click on the alerts, you'll get the notification when I am ready to go. But until then, fine folks, this is William Martin signing off as always and saying, excuse me, thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.